Welcome to Spotlight Television. I'm Damon Roberts. Vich Partners is a boutique consulting firm with a big reputation of helping companies improve their revenues and decrease their costs significantly. Vich Partners started in 2008 and has been shaking up the industry by dramatically growing earnings for their powerful clients. When your supply chain is choking and you need to transform, but you don't know who to call, well, my next guest may be that person. You're going to call this guy, Alec Hudnut, the managing partner of Vich Partners. I want to welcome him to Spotlight Television. Alec, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Damon. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you. Such an important topic. It's such an interesting time in what's going on in the country financially and the economy. I want to get into all of that. But I guess first, tell me a little bit about you and tell me a little bit about Vich Partners.
So Vich Partners is, as you said, a boutique consulting firm, and we focus on earnings growth. And our clients are as small as 50 million in revenue to greater than 50 billion in revenue. And our consulting approach is different than most consulting firms. We believe that the answer to improving profitability already lies within inside the company. So imagine in your career, in your life, and for all the listeners as well, when you were at work and things were going wrong, or just doing your normal job every day, if you had been the owner of that business, or if the owner of the business had sat down with you and said, what are 2 or 3 things that we can do better here, differently here, you would have had an opinion. You would have had an idea on how to make things more streamlined for the customer or get rid of unexpected delays, etc. And those ideas, which often start as complaints from employees, can turn into initiatives that can improve the efficiency of the business or improve the revenue of the business. So our consulting philosophy at Vich Partners is the answer lies within. And the reason that it hasn't been implemented yet is that the complaint or the idea hasn't been sufficiently quantified, right? What's the benefit of doing this? And what are the barriers to getting it done? Who are the people inside of the organization who have been blocking this idea? And so we work on both quantifying the initiative and breaking down the blockers, and also then helping the company to implement the initiative that was sourced from within.
So let's talk a little bit about the companies you're working with. And to kind of your whole point there, who's deciding within the company that, hey, maybe it's time to reach out to somebody like you guys?
One category of customers are people who want to be profitable who are not. Most of our work, however, is with companies that are profitable, that want to grow revenue, but don't want to tap the equity markets or the debt markets to grow. So they work with us to improve their cash flows, and then they reinvest that in growth engines.
When you talk about profitability, and I think this may be the most important question we talk about in here, and you think about what's going on right now in the economy with companies. You have a possible recession looming. You have supply chain prices obviously still increasing, supply chain problems. I mean, everybody's familiar with what a supply chain is now, where before, I don't think if you asked 10 people, 2 of them would have known what the supply chain is. Now everyone's familiar with it. So you have recession, you have obviously inflation still running higher than obviously the Fed would like to see it. You've got money much more expensive, 500 basis points of federal interest rates raising in less than about 18, 19 months. To think about company and profitability, it is a very tough environment. So when you guys come in an environment like this, do you have the same approach? Do you have to change what you guys do? How do you look at profitability in this kind of environment?
Well, 3 to 4 years ago, in many industries, particularly tech, profitability wasn't important. It was about revenue growth at any price. And I remember talking with the CEO of a publicly traded tech company who I went to business school with a long time ago. And I said, you know, we'd love to help you get profitable. And he said to me, we don't care about profits. We care about revenue growth. Well, today, 3 to 4 years later, it's all about profitability. Yeah. Because as you mentioned, Damon, it's more expensive to borrow debt. It's harder to tap the public markets. And therefore, the way to accumulate your cash reserves so that you can continue to grow is to be more profitable. And instead of being valued on a multiple of revenue, we're seeing now, especially in the tech sector and others, EBITDA multiples, EPS multiples now becoming more important. And that's the way it should be. I mean, people are in business to make money. If you're not making money, the business is subsidizing your customer. It's not yet a real business.
Right.
You got to be in the business of making money. And so at this particular point in time, with rising inflation, rising debt costs, harder to tap the equity markets, Vici is very busy because we focus on one thing only at Vici Partners, which is growing operating income at our clients.
So when you guys first go in, is there anything that you immediately look for to kind of give you maybe those red flags on how much you have to do? What are those first kind of either warning signs or first things that you go, wow, okay, we can really put some gasoline on this fire? What are those things you look for first?
We always look at sourcing and procurement. So what are they buying their goods and services for from their suppliers? Because we do a lot of work in sourcing and procurement, and we have a good database of what is the reasonable price to pay. So we always look at sourcing. Interestingly enough, in procurement and sourcing, while price is important, right? We want to make sure our clients aren't paying more than the market. What's more important is getting the client to redefine what they're sourcing.
Talk to me a little bit more about your competition in the space and what really is separating you from some of those other firms.
The big thing that's different about Vici versus them is we have an unleveraged consulting model, which is also the antithesis of the industry. So
explain what that means to somebody who's just hearing that for the first time.
So we have no junior people on our projects. There's no 28-year-old, top of the class Harvard Business School, young man on our projects.
Right.
Everybody is in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They've run companies. They've been executives in companies. They've owned companies. Those are the consultants that we bring to clients. And the reason that's important is to vastly oversimplify consulting. It's a formula. Q times B equals V. The quality of the idea times the buy-in for the idea equals the value you're going to generate for the idea in implementation. In our process, we do a 6-month sprint where we're identifying all the initiatives, getting buy-in for them, and then getting a green light and building implementation plans for them. Half our time is spent on the buy-in and the consensus building. And people like you and me who've been in the industry a long time, we can do it better because we've been in all of those difficult political situations where it's hard to get things done. So one big difference is that our model spends a lot of time on the buy-in and the consensus building, because without good buy-in, the idea won't get implemented, or it will get implemented at a substantially lower value than it could be. So that's one big difference. A second from the larger consulting firms is much of our compensation is derived from the cash flow that our clients actually generate from the initiatives that we co-created. And so we tie a lot of our compensation to, did you actually get the 100 million you thought you were going to get?
Right.
And please pay us when you do.
Right.
That's
so
a very
realized against unrealized in some ways.
That's a big difference between, here's the fancy blue book that's 200 pages long that tells you exactly what you have to do in your oil refinery. Is that ever going to get implemented? What we do is we're implementing 36 detailed initiatives that the oil refinery manager signed off on, the engineers signed off on, the guy in maintenance who has to implement it signed off on.
It's like skin in the game. What I'm hearing you say on a most simplistic level is everybody has to have skin in this game, whether it's like you said, everybody's skin in the game, top down, including you guys when you come in. Everybody has to be invested in the success, in that realized profit gain that we're providing, that value. It doesn't maximize itself unless everybody has skin in the game.
Yes, you hit it on the nail on the head. If people think of themselves as employees, companies don't work as well as they could. If employees think of themselves as owners, guess what? The company starts working a lot better.
So let's talk to companies out there, potential clients who are watching this today and saying, man, I wonder if that's us. We could probably... I would think the two things they think of is how is this going to work? What happens? How's that initial call work? How do we get this started? Can we afford it? Some of those basic questions that, those mid to smaller companies are thinking about. What advice can you give them a little bit about, what this first experience with you guys is like, how you work initially, and why they should contact you guys, go to the website, get that information? What can you say to them?
So go to our website, vichipartners.com. And then the way in which we initiate work with clients is we'll have a pretty good idea from our benchmarking of working in comparable companies or companies that have similar issues as to what the savings potential might be or the earnings growth potential might be. And so we'll sit down with the CEO or CFO and say, given everything we know, here's what we think would happen if we worked with you. Is that valuable enough for you? And is that valuable enough for us? Because we're in it together.
Right, skin in the game.
Yeah, and we charge a modest retainer because we want the clients to take us, we want some skin in the game up front, right? But most of our fee is earned when the cash is actually generated. And typically our clients are returning a material return, very fast payback, and a rapid growth to their earnings. So our buyers are usually the CEO or the owners of the company if it's a PE firm, and we can figure out pretty quickly whether we can help that business. And if we don't think we can help them, we'll let them know that as well.
Yeah.
So when we say yes, we're in a sense putting ourselves at risk. We're investing a team. There's cost associated with that.
Sure.
We have as I said earlier, very experienced people on our teams who are very expensive. So when we take on a project, we are making a big commitment to our clients.
Yeah.
And we're happy to do so if we think there's sufficient opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's been an important conversation, especially what's going on in the world, the business environment of today, like you said.
Right now, Damon, given the macroeconomic environments of increasing debt costs, inflation continuing, or at least probably not dropping too quickly, difficulty accessing equity markets, companies really do need to think about their profitability, because the more profitable they are, the more they can invest in growth. Because the other ways to invest in growth aren't as available as they were a year ago or so. And so right now, it's all about the profitability. And Vici Partners does just that. We help companies become more profitable, either to help them get out of a money-losing situation or to generate additional funds so they can invest in growth. And that's the one thing that we do. And right now, that is a very, very important activity for companies to be pursuing, whether you're the $50 million revenue small company of a PE portfolio or a $50 billion public company.
That's great stuff. It's been a great conversation. We've been speaking with Alec Hudnut, who is the managing partner of Vici Partners. You can find them online, www.vichipartners.com. Alec, thanks for being on Spotlight Television.
Damon, thank you very much. I enjoyed our conversation.
It's been a great one. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time right here on Spotlight Television. Welcome back to Spotlight Television. People are living longer, and this is expected to continue. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau estimates that the average life expectancy will increase an additional 6 years by 2060. While a longer life can influence how people think about the future, it can also add to the challenges of retirement planning and the need to create a sustainable source of lifetime income. As always, you should consult your financial representative to determine what may be best for your individual needs. But today, I have the pleasure to talk to one of the best. He is one of the country's top wealth advisors who has been helping Americans since 1972 minimize their taxes to maximize their retirement. He created the famous proprietary untaxed family wealth smiling retiree process method. He's a renowned IRMAA specialist and is known for providing tax tips that even your current tax preparer may not know about. Please welcome to Spotlight Television, Navy Dowdy. Navy, how are you?
I'm fantastic.
Very good. It's a pleasure to have you on Spotlight. It's such an interesting time to talk about this topic with so much going on in the economy. But why don't you take a second and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, how long you've been doing this, and tell the audience just a little bit about Navy Dowdy.
Well, I've been doing this for over 40 years, as you mentioned. I worked in corporate America for a few years after college, and then they sent me out into the field, and then after a couple of years, they wanted me to come back to the home office, and I said, you know, I've been investing in real estate, doing better, making more in that than I was working, and so I didn't want to go back to the home office, so I just started building buildings, and that's how I got into tax saving for people. I always remember I was sitting in my office with a cardiologist, and when I started building apartments, I noticed that the biggest thing that the tenants complained about was sound. So I developed this sound system between the apartments, and I had a mock-up of it sitting on my desk. And I showed this to the cardiologist, and he said, "Oh, that's great. What about the tax savings?" Next day, same thing with a orthodontist. He's there, you know, and I'm showing him my fabulous system, and he said, "Great. Does that really work?" "Yeah." "How about the tax savings?" So after a while, I finally figured out that's really all they cared about. They didn't care about my great system. All they cared about was the tax savings. So since then, everything that I do has revolved around legally and ethically, has to be legally and ethically, right in the code, saving people taxes that they don't necessarily have to pay.
Have you ever seen a more challenging time for what you do than these last couple of years?
I haven't, and you're right. In fact, this is the time that I developed my process for, because as you say, when people are nearing retirement, think of it, over 70 million people are going into retirement. If you go back to the last time we had massively rising inflation back in the 70s, the baby boomers were just starting to go to work. We were a creditor nation then, meaning that everybody owed us money. So exactly the opposite now. The baby boomers are all retiring, and we're a pretty big debtor nation now, over 30 trillion in debt. So things are completely different. We've had a long upswing in markets, you know, massively lowered interest rates since 1982, in fact. In fact, we hit the lowest interest rates in human history a couple years ago.
All right, Tax Secrets for the Smiling Retiree with IRMAA, second edition. You made a point, I believe, of putting with IRMAA on the cover. I don't think I've ever heard of it before I talked to you. So tell me, what is IRMAA and why is it so important for people to understand what it is?
Almost nobody's heard of IRMAA, which is really, really shocking. IRMAA is simply income-related monthly adjustment amount. That's what it means, and it relates to your Medicare costs. And we say it's a secret tax. It really isn't secret. It's hidden right out in the open. The thing that's a little bit tricky about it is that when you turn on Medicare, the cost that you have for that Medicare, they look back 2 years. So imagine, typical person retires at 65. Now, granted, people are living longer now, but let's just say they retire at 65, turn on Medicare. They have to turn on Medicare when they retire. They look back 2 years. Well, what was your income 2 years ago? You certainly had a higher wages 2 years before you have in the year that you retire. So that's going to affect the IRMAA tax. And we, like you point out, I spent most of my career helping people just with income tax. But IRMAA, there's a lot of taxes. So let's just go back to that for a second. They tell us that Tax Freedom Day now is past the end of April. So imagine that. That's for the average person. Average person works the first third of the year just to pay their income tax, right? And all their taxes. For the people watching this, probably will be longer. Might be the end of April, end of May, even into June. And you pointed out 40%, but then there's all kinds of surcharges on top of that. So a lot of people are really hitting 50% brackets. IRMAA is just another tax. If you went to buy health insurance before you retire, what would they base the cost on? Your health, right? Once you retire, however, and turn on Medicare, They don't base your cost on your health. They base it on your wealth, or we should say your income.
You write these books, like we talked a little bit about, Tax Secrets for the Smiling Retiree. You've written some other bestsellers. Tell me a little bit about why you write these books. Tell me about the reaction from people who read it and go, man, I never knew that. Why do you write these books?
Well, the first one was Tax Tips, Financial Success for the Smiling Retiree. I just took a compilation of a lot of the things I had written and sent to clients and put it in a book. But the next one that I have on the docket, I have the cover already made, and the outline is Income Secrets for the Smiling Retiree, because that's really what people need in retirement.
Even when you look at families who, say, have done really well, and they talk about maybe putting everything into a revocable trust to pass on to the kids to try to, protect their assets. God forbid the parents have to go into, whatever the future holds. But when you look at 401ks and these retirement things, and you're going, well, you're saving money to eventually you're just going to have to pay the taxes on it. So the money's not working for you. And even with some family trusts, you run into those kind of issues where it just ends up being the kids who have to be the one who end up paying it.
And probably at a higher tax rate, because the parents are now in their 80s and in many cases having huge income. The kids are right at their peak earnings when they inherit it. So they pay several taxes. They pay income tax. They may pay generation skipping tax. I just had somebody last week. Somebody had set up a trust for them thinking that, and they thought it would avoid tax because they left it to their grandkids. Well, it's generation skipping tax. You may have inheritance tax. Different states have inheritance tax. We don't think that much for most people about estate tax now because it's over $12 million exemption, but that, remember, is dropping in half January 1st, 2026, and there's a big push. We just had one of the consultants I've got said that their lobbyist called an emergency meeting a couple weeks ago and said they're telling us that they have to sunset that law, that tax law, earlier than 2026. Who knows? So we want to deal with the current law, but keep in mind what's probably coming.
Yeah.
And rising taxes is one of them.
Yeah.
In fact, here's my ultimate financial tsunami, and the top thing is taxes. Rising inflation, rising interest rates, and rising taxes.
Boy, how accurate is that right now? If rising interest rates, rising inflation, and rising taxes.
I sketched that out on a napkin sitting in a conference in New Zealand early in 2016, hoping that wouldn't be true, but certainly that's what's coming.
What's your feeling on Social Security moving forward?
Well, you notice they used to talk a lot about fixing entitlements, and as you just mentioned, I haven't heard that lately. The IRMAA tax may be the plan to fix that, because you don't have to means test Social Security. It's already means tested by the IRMAA tax. So kind of under the radar, it's hidden in plain sight.
What's your most important point that you want to leave with the audience today on everything we've discussed? What's the most important point you want them to know? And then I also want you to let people know how they can get in touch with you, find out more about what you do, find out about your books. And I know you do a lot of traveling, you do a lot of speaking, seminars on the road. Give everybody where they can get in touch with you as well.
NavyDowdy.com. You can go there. You can go to, just type my name into YouTube. You can look. I've got probably 200 tax tips on there. Call my office, 630-893-4142. It's on all my books. You have to change your strategy when you go into retirement. Now, the billionaires, it doesn't matter. But for the vast majority of Americans, it's vitally important. You asked about how do we pick somebody to work with. I missed this, probably most important thing of all. Make sure that the people you're working with know about taxes. Don't let somebody tell you that the phrase, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. The taxes are the dog. They're the big dog. Taxes and inflation are going to eat everything up if you don't deal with it. So just make sure who you're working with knows about taxes, has experience in distribution and preservation of your money. That's the most critical thing once you get into retirement. You have to have the income. That's the biggest thing I would say. You know, if you think about what can you do with your money, you can put it in stocks, bonds, real estate, cash, or commodities. That's it. All the financial products are just some combination of those, and they can only do 5 things for you. They can give you growth, they can give you income, they can give you tax benefits, they can give you liquidity, or they can give you some level of protection or not. That's all there is. If you had $50 million or more, you probably have your own office with people employed to take care of everything, you know, CPAs and tax attorneys and so on. For people that don't have that much money, what I did was I started my own, what's in effect a virtual family office, my Untaxed Family Wealth company. And what that does is tries to take the techniques that we use for people that have got $30, $40 million and bring them down to the normal people that don't have that much money. Because everybody says the rich don't pay taxes. Well, the truth is the rich do pay less taxes because they hire people to make sure that they're not paying excess tax. And so that's what my Untaxed Family Wealth family office does for people. Our mission is to try and save America's retirement accounts.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation. Again, navydowdy.com online is one place to go. I know your YouTube. Again, you can check out your books. Your books are available on Amazon. Books are available wherever books are sold.
Get on your favorite online bookseller.
All right, very good. Navy Dowdy, it's been great to have you here. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on Spotlight Television.
Glad to be here.